genuinely never felt so unsafe in my life, ever.
We are one, but we are many.
We're up against it, and it's not getting any easier.
Welcome to the second episode of Voice of the 51%. A bite-sized show, full of tasty morsels, including the crazy yet real stories and videos of real life in the gender identity world. News, current events and also hopefully some ideas for you to get active and join us to fight back against the insanity and authoritarianism that is engulfing our country. Welcome back, champions of equality, to another riveting episode of Voice of the 51%, where we fearlessly tackle the pressing issues affecting women in Australia and around the world. Today, we shine a spotlight on the disheartening loss of women's sex-based rights in Australia. Get ready to witness a saga of confusion, intrusion, and enough head-scratching moments to make you question if we accidentally slipped into a parallel universe. Let's kick off this rollercoaster ride by reporting on censorship. In our first episode, we highlighted the appalling censorship in Australia of the voices of women and men who are speaking out to protect women's sports and vulnerable children. In the ultimate twist of irony, that whole episode was banned by YouTube. It wasn't just censored, it was completely banned for reporting facts that were already in the public domain. We suspect that Australia's E-Safety Commissioner Julie Inman-Grant or one of the four men Justin Dennis, Jennifer, Buckley, Augie, now Amy Ross or old mate, the desk, got upset and complained.
I had no idea you could milk a cat.
Oh yeah, you can milk anything with nipples.
I have nipples, Greg. Could you milk me?
But who knows, eh? Apparently, for stating known facts and asserting biological reality, we are somehow guilty of hate. Let's be very clear here, we do not hate anybody. This cancel culture that seeks to silence the voices of women, in particular, is setting a very, very dangerous precedent where we must accept the nonsense language of a small but very motivated and determined cult that censors opposition and silences all dissent. Although this next video is hilarious, and we do encourage you to laugh at it, there is a dangerous reality here. Think about what this gender cult wants to censor and what they do and say themselves. They support sexualized drag queens going into our schools and libraries deliberately to sexualize our children, but cry literal genocide if we refuse to use their preferred pronouns, oppose the medicalization and mutilation of children or tell the truth about their dangerous ideology.
The one that really killed me was last Christmas we canceled a song that was written in the 1940s called Baby It's Cold Outside. People said that they were triggered, that the lyrics were rapey, and they had toxic masculinity. And that's fine if you feel that way, but radio stations across the country wouldn't play the song because people were outraged. Which is fine if you feel that way, but at the exact same time, the #1 song in this nation for over 2 months was Wet Ass Pussy. I am not making that up. You can look it up. Google it. So I want to wrap up my show by comparing and contrasting the lyrics of these two songs. Let's see if indeed this country has lost its fucking mind, shall we? Let's start with the horribly offensive Christmas song written just after World War II. I really can't stay, baby, it's cold outside. I gotta go away, baby, it's cold outside. This evening has been so very nice. Yeah, you fucking with some wet-ass pussy. Bring a bucket and a mop for this wet-ass pussy. Beat it up, N-word, extra large, extra hard. Put this pussy right in your face, swipe your nose like a credit card. My mother will start to worry. Beautiful, what's your hurry? My father will be pacing the floor, listen to that fireplace roar, well maybe just half a drink more. Spit in my mouth. Look in my eyes, this pussy is wet, come take a dive. Talk your shit, bite your lip, ask for a car while you ride that dick. My sister will be suspicious. Gosh, your lips look delicious. My brother will be there at the door, waves on a tropical shore, well, maybe just a cigarette more. I don't want to spit, I want to gulp, I want to gag, I want to choke. I want you to touch that little dangly thing that's swinging the back of my throat. I submit to you, ladies and gentlemen, this country has lost its fucking mind.
As we warned, it was hilarious, but think about what happens to women who speak up. Reem Al-Salem, the UN Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women and Girls, in a statement on the 22nd of May wrote,
I am disturbed by the frequent tactic of smear campaigns against women, girls and their allies on the basis of their beliefs on non-discrimination based on sex and same-sex relations. Branding them as Nazis, genocidaires, or extremists is a means of attack and intimidation with the purpose of deterring women from speaking and expressing their views. Such actions are deeply troubling, as they are intended to instill fear in them, shame them into silence, and incite violence and hatred against them. Such acts severely affect the dignified participation of women and girls in society. I am also concerned by the way in which provisions that criminalize hate speech based on a number of grounds, including gender expression or gender identity, have been interpreted in some countries. Women and girls have a right to discuss any subject free of intimidation and threats of violence. This includes issues that are important to them, particularly if they relate to parts of their innate identity, and on which discrimination is prohibited. Holding and expressing views about the scope of rights in society based on sex and gender identity should not be delegitimized, trivialized, or dismissed. According to international human rights law, any restriction on freedom of expression should be carried out strictly in accordance with the human rights standards of legality, necessity, proportionality, and to serve a legitimate aim. Those disagreeing with the views of women and girls expressing concerns related to gender identity and sex also have a right to express their opinion. However, in doing so they must not threaten the safety and integrity of those they are protesting against and disagreeing with. Sweeping restrictions on the ability of women and men to raise concerns regarding the scope of rights based on gender identity and sex are in violation of the fundamentals of freedom of thought and freedom of belief and expression and amounts to unjustified or blanket censorship. Of particular concern are the various forms of reprisals against women, including censorship, legal harassment, employment loss, loss of income, removal from social media platforms, speaking engagements, and the refusal to publish research conclusions and articles. In some cases, women politicians are sanctioned by the political parties, including through the threat of dismissal or actual dismissal.
A somber thought indeed, particularly when you realize that it was Daniel Andrews, Premier of Victoria, that she's referring to calling women Nazis, and John Pesutto, Liberal leader in Victoria, who has expelled the female MP Moira Deeming from the Liberal Parliamentary Party. Moira's crime? She attended a women's rights rally on the steps of the Victorian Parliament and spoke on behalf of a female Muslim constituent, who was too frightened in enlightened Victoria to speak out on her own behalf about the appalling state of women's rights in that state. Now, back to our regular scheduled program. Strap in, folks, because we're about to explore the mind-boggling loss of women's sex-based rights in Australia. Get ready for a wild ride through the land of confusion, where common sense seems to have gone on an extended vacation. We will be delving into the murky waters of women's legal rights. In a plot twist that defies all logic, certain lawmakers seem to believe that the notion of sex is as fluid as the latest TikTok dance. They're eager to replace the clear distinction between men and women with a hazy concept of self-identified gender. Now, call me old-fashioned, but I thought legal rights were meant to protect the vulnerable, not erase them like an unsent Snapchat message. Buckle up, folks, because we're now venturing into the uncharted territory of single-sex spaces. Picture this: bathrooms, changing rooms, and even women's shelters becoming a free-for-all, where anyone with a sudden whim or self-proclaimed identity can stroll in and join the party. I mean, who doesn't enjoy the thrill of unexpected company while you're trying to take care of business or find sanctuary? It's like entering a lottery with zero prize money, only awkward, frightening and intimidating encounters with perverts and fetishists. Brace yourselves for the next mind-boggling pitfall on this journey, the world of women's sports. In an attempt to level the playing field, some policymakers have seemingly forgotten that men and women are biologically different. They've given the green light for athletes who were once identified as male to compete against women, leaving our female athletes in a never-ending race against testosterone-fueled opponents. It's like replacing the hurdles with a never-ending line of brick walls. As more and more failed men, as we reported in the last episode, force their way unwanted and unneeded into women's sports, a battlefield where fairness and equality used to reign supreme, women's sport has become an embarrassing joke. The winds of change have blown in, and suddenly, we're witnessing the rise of testosterone-fueled competitors in women's categories. The idea that biological advantages might play a role seems to have vanished into thin air. It's like replacing the Olympic motto of faster, higher, stronger with unfair, imbalanced, frustrating, and downright dangerous. Shortly we will take a trip down memory lane as we will revisit the lost legal rights since 2013 thanks to the excellent website lostwomensrights.com. Just a few years ago, Australia seemed to be making progress toward equality. We had our first female Prime Minister. Little did we know what she and her government were up to. But before that, let's consider the notion of legal rights. You know, those pesky things we fought for decades to secure. Well, it seems that in Australia, the definition of woman has become a bit blurred. Suddenly, anyone can identify as a woman based on their feelings alone. I'm not saying feelings aren't valid, but when it comes to legal rights, we need a little more substance than just a feeling. It's like turning the legal system into a game of guess who. And let's not forget the bathroom battlegrounds. Remember when bathrooms, changing rooms, and women's shelters were designated for biological females? Well, apparently, that's just too old-fashioned. Now, we're expected to embrace the concept of self-identification, where any man with a whimsical declaration can waltz into spaces specifically created to protect women's privacy and safety. It's like throwing open the doors to Narnia and saying, "Come on in, Mr. Wolf in sheep's clothing." Now, if you like most people think that LGBTQIA+ represents gay people, think again. Since the equal marriage referendum they have become exclusively concerned with everything but the LG and the B. Yes, you heard that right. Why do you think you hear nothing but gender identity, transgender, non-binary and that hateful slur queer all the time? Because they hate lesbians, gay men and bisexuals and are trying to erase same-sex attraction. The loss of lesbian rights. You haven't heard yet? Once upon a time, being a lesbian meant being attracted exclusively to women. But hold on tight because the rules of attraction have been rewritten by the TQ+ cult. Lesbians are now expected to embrace the inclusive definition, where men who identify as women can lay claim to the lesbian label. It's like saying, hey, ladies, the pool of potential partners just got a whole lot bigger. Yes, they are men, but now that they have transed, they are now women and you must accept them too. But wait a minute, isn't that erasing the very essence of lesbian identity? Still don't believe us? Have a look at this. We are glad to report that this excellent soliloquy by a proud Australian lesbian went viral around the world on Twitter. We reproduce it here with her kind permission.
This is a message for all the natural-born women out there. If you are currently endorsing the claim that trans women are women because it's the compassionate and progressive thing to do, then you are supporting a dangerous lie built upon a short-sighted fallacy. Because, newsflash, trans women are not women. They're men who pose as women. And you are saying that the feelings of these men are more important than the rights and safety and dignity of actual women. With your allyship, collaboration, women become cis women, a category within our own sex. The sanctity of motherhood becomes the nihilism of birthing parent, and vile slurs like vagina haver and menstruator become de rigueur. So I call bullshit on this, and so should you, and loudly, because to do otherwise is to leave a demoralizing legacy for women and girls. A world in which their uniqueness is irrelevant, their femininity a fetish, their voices silenced, and their opportunities stolen. And that, ladies, is not compassion or progressivism. It is nothing short of high treason.
Thank you, Kate, for speaking up for all women, not just for lesbians. Now, if that didn't inspire you to get on Twitter, seek her out and follow her. I don't know what will. Her Twitter handle is @MsListersCis. Now, let's rewind to the year 2013 when it seemed like progress was being made in the fight for women's rights. We had a female prime minister, we had had the apology and were addressing issues around the stolen generation and were moving towards equal marriage rights for lesbians and gay men. All seemed rosy in the garden. But alas, little did we know that the pendulum was swinging in the opposite direction. But why? We find ourselves questioning whether we've been caught in a time loop. But how did this happen? The hard-fought legal rights that were once celebrated have now slipped through our fingers. It's like waking up one morning to find ourselves in a twisted version of Back to the Future, where Marty McFly's mother never stood up for herself. In 2013, the Gillard government rewrote the Sex Discrimination Act to remove the word sex. Yes, you heard that right, they removed the word sex from the Sex Discrimination Act and replaced it with the utterly meaningless term gender identity, a term that comes from postmodernist philosophy and has still not been adequately defined even by the government. And so with the raise of a hand and the stroke of a pen, women's rights were eliminated and eroded in Australia due to the conflation of gender identity with biological sex. Most of these rights were taken by stealth as gender replaced sex in press council guidelines, sporting guidelines, government-style guides and acts. Or as federal, state, and local governments signed up to gender identity ideology audits, or were influenced by special interest lobby groups, the AIDS Council of New South Wales (ACON), Rainbow Health Australia, Rainbow Families, etc. And states like Victoria and Queensland introduced gender self-ID into legislation. These rights were lost with little to no inclusion of all stakeholders, women, parents or homosexuals participating, or public discussion as a democracy should warrant. We, therefore, need to regain women's rights. Because while everybody raves on about Gillard's excellent speech about misogyny, like most two-faced politicians, a detour into the twilight zone. Hard-fought victories in areas such as equal pay, workplace discrimination, and reproductive rights are now being eroded as if someone decided to hit the reset button on women's rights progress. It's a real lifetime machine, but instead of going forward, we're heading backwards. Last but not least, let's shed light on the alarming disregard for women's voices and experiences. It's as if the 51% is being silenced to accommodate the feelings and desires of a vocal minority. Instead of fostering dialogue and understanding, we're being told to shut up, sit down, and make room for everyone else. Well, newsflash, women's rights aren't a buffet where you can pick and choose the dishes you like while leaving us with scraps. It's truly mind-boggling how the landscape has shifted. Women's sex-based rights are being trampled upon in the name of inclusivity. But let's not forget, inclusivity should not come at the expense of erasing women's unique experiences and needs. It's like trying to fit a square peg into a round hole while insisting they're the same shape. No human has ever changed sex, no matter what these men want to believe.
At Whangarei Girls High School, there was a petition to get litter boxes in our bathrooms
for furries, girls that identify as cats and dogs and whatnot.
The principal went on leave because of the stress of this,
and they ended up taking shits in the sink, in the toilet sink,
because they wanted to identify as cats and dogs.
How old were they?
They were younger than
17,
us.
16.
15, 14. Maybe. Maybe, yeah. That is crazy.
Yeah. Wow. It's just outrageous.
Whangarei, shit town.
Don't go to Whangarei.
Never.
So, what can we do to combat this absurdity? It starts with raising our voices and challenging the status quo. We must demand that women's rights are protected and respected. We need to bring attention to the erosion of women's sex-based rights and push for legislation that upholds fairness and equality. Remember, progress should not mean regression. It's not about denying the existence and rights of others, but don't ask us to lie either. This is simply about preserving the gains made by women without compromising their safety and well-being. There you have it, folks, a glimpse into the loss of women's sex-based rights in Australia. It's like the rug has been pulled out from under us, and we're left wondering where our hard-won battles have gone. But fear not, because the fight is not over. We must raise our voices, challenge the status quo, and demand that women's rights are protected and respected. There you have it, fearless fighters for equality, a glimpse into the disheartening loss of women's sex-based rights in Australia. We stand at a crossroads where we must fight for the rights and spaces that have been hard-won by generations of women. Let's not be silenced by those who try to diminish our voices or dismiss our concerns. Together, we can reclaim the ground we've lost and pave the way for a future where women's rights are recognized and respected. Remember to like, subscribe, and share this video with everyone. This has been the Voice of the 51%, your platform for truth and justice. Stay fierce, friends. One final parting thought. In July, Australia and New Zealand host the FIFA Women's World Cup, and the eyes and the media of the world will be watching. It might be worth thinking about displaying banners and raising our voices at games and stadia around both countries to let the world know how appallingly both countries actually treat women. What do you think? Will you be going? Will you speak up?
So, until next time, ask yourself, is it true or was it just made up by the ABC?